the name Tron Legacy is both, in all reality, it is a legacy film, right? They're taking this movie that was somewhat successful, had a massive cult following, and went, let's make a film about it. I don't necessarily think that's what's happening right now. I think Disney is desperate and going, how can we make more money? Well, Tron Legacy was successful, so let's make another one.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to another episode of A Lost Plot, the podcast by storytellers for storytellers so that we can tell better stories ourselves. As always, I'm your host, Maverick, and today we have back with us our two favorite co-hosts, Avalon and Andrew, to review the latest in the Tron series, but not for long. That's right, we're talking about Tron Legacy, the 2010 release, which is the story by Edward Kitsis, Adam Horowitz, Brian Klugman, and Lee Sternthal, with a screenplay by Adam Kitsis and Adam Horowitz as well. This was also directed by Joseph Kosinski and is based on the original Tron movie by Steven Lisberger and Bonnie McBurn. So, now that we got all the accolades out of the way, you know who to praise or condemn for the rating we get for this film, but we want to get on those initial impressions first. So, Andrew, what are your initial thoughts and rating for Tron Legacy?
This is an instance of where the second movie was much better than the first.
Like Suicide Squad.
Yeah, I mean, I guess we could go with that. I'm not like Captain America.
This would be a time for a sarcastic comment, but we're going to forego those. Avalon, what is your initial thoughts and rating for Tron Legacy?
First thought is this is CGI done right, where it's actually visually stunning at points. It is a very fun movie to watch, even regardless of what you think of the movie and story. Just the visuals are spectacular at times in this movie, and it very well fits the theme and story. So, just the ideas. So, but as far as the story itself, it's definitely... I remember really liking this movie first watching it years ago, and I still really like it now. There are some things that slightly disappointed me this time around, I realized, but overall, it still holds up in my book. So, I gave it a 6.6.
There we go. All right. I forget, Andrew, did you say what your rating was?
No, I didn't.
What
Would
is
you
it?
like me to? It is a flat, solid 8.
Wow, bro, loved this movie. That's insane. Okay, I was not expecting that. Well, guess I have you beat today, Andrew, because... Nah, just kidding. I have the lowest rating of everyone. I got a 6.35. But I still think this is a good example of, one of maybe two series that I see is very good at building off of the past and extending it. Now, I think the foremost example that is always trying to push these boundaries, whether it's new worlds, new concepts, new ideas, new lightsabers, is Star Wars, where they are known for trying to show something that you've seen previously and extend on that idea, whether it's a double-bladed, whether it's the handle blade or whatever it is, right? They're always trying to do something new that will wow the audiences, light speeding through a ship or whatever. They are always trying to take an idea and then extend it. Whether or not those go well is a debate for a different podcast, which we already actually did. You can watch those and hear our arguments. That's not for today. What we're doing today is we're talking about Tron. Now, Tron, if you saw the 8-bit original that came back in the 1980s, you already know our thoughts from last week on that one. But they do very, very well on taking the concepts in that one and building on them, extending them in new ways, introducing new concepts, and even discussing some of the ideas we really wished were in the first one were actually in the second one. So I was very happy with a lot of things I saw. So even with that 6.3, I could be convinced to take it higher. I would love to be convinced to take it higher. I thoroughly enjoyed it. This is one of those few times where I was watching. I had to pause partway through, and I was like, dang it, I don't want to. I want to see what happens next. So it was at a crucial point, so that helped. But anyways, we'll get into that today. So if you're excited, keep watching. But before we do, if you haven't watched the film and you want to get those an idea of what even we're talking about because you're listening to this podcast for some reason without watching the film, whatever, we'll feel free to indulge you here. Andrew, give them a summary of what Tron Legacy is about.
This film picks up with Kevin Flynn, the protagonist from the original Tron movie, telling a bedtime story to his son, the story of the grid. The movie quickly progresses as he goes to work that night and never comes back home. And then we have a time skip that shows Sam Flynn, now an adult, terrorizing the CEO and board members of what was his father's company. He releases their latest OS model to the public for free, and has like a picture of a dog on the screen. And then he's confronted by Alan, who is the user, is the term that would be used in the film, that Tron's character is based off of. And Alan tells him, I got a page from your dad's office, you should go check it out. Sam begrudgingly goes to the arcade, which we see in the first film. It's all covered up and kind of shut down. And he discovers his dad's old office, which has the laser from the original movie as well as a computer. And he ends up teleporting himself into, or transporting himself, however you want to look at it, into the grid. And ends up kind of bumbling his way through, unwittingly finding Clue, who he originally thinks is his dad, competes on the grid on a light cycle, does some disc battles, ultimately meets his dad, and his dad says, well, glad you're here. We can live out our lives in misery together. And Sam says, screw that. I'm going to go and try to fix things. And thus begins their adventure trying to make their way back to the portal and off of the grid.
Yep. That's the basic summary. So if you're interested in seeing the ideas around the virtual world being manifest in the grid and all of the thoughts that came out in this film, keep listening. We're going to get right into it as we always do, starting with that opening scene. You have this flashback / initial opener with Kevin talking to his son and then leaving and never returning, right? Mysteriously disappearing, and all of the chaos that happens to Encom, the company, as a result. And then you see Sam, his son, has grown up. He's a young adult. He's messing with his dad's company, foiling their plot to make more money while at the same time giving things away, and then living out his life in a shed. And then he gets the pager from his dad to go to his old arcade and get sucked into the world that his father had created. What are you guys' thoughts on that opening scene and all the stuff that introduces us to the plot of Tron Legacy? Andrew, if you want to start us off, go ahead.
I think it did a great job of reintroducing Kevin Flynn's character. It actually seemingly gave him some sort of change from the previous film. The fact that he has a child means he has somewhat settled down, and is no longer the complete arrogant, childish individual, even though if he carries a lot of those traits with him. You get introduced to the new protagonist of the film, which is Sam Flynn. You get his backstory, and they're very easily able to give you his major flaw, which is he completely rejects all semblance of the idea of the legacy his father left behind and the responsibility that most would look at and say is his. I think there's also some cool, if you want to call it foreshadowing, like with him using his being all into his bike and riding that on the freeway. You also have some little glimpses at his action figures, which you see later, and he quite literally references and said, I have an action figure of you on my shelf. So I thought the opener was great. I think the music in this movie is so good. The way that it just goes so well with the setting of the film. And it's like one of those scores where when you're watching the movie, you like actually pay attention to the music, and you can like, most of the time the music is just kind of in the background. In my mind, this music is kind of almost in the foreground where it's coloring the scene itself. So I think the music does a really, really good job of setting the scene for the movie, just play by play.
Yeah, and I will say the music can accentuate things. In this case, it definitely does. It not really huge on like the storytelling aspect of it, other than it accentuates things well, done well. I'd agree. I want to hear Avalon's thoughts, though. What are your thoughts on the opening of this film? Did you think it was compelling?
This is one of the. I kind of felt like the opening was kind of slow with introducing introducing Kevin and everything. because it starts with him telling a bedtime story, and just the way it happens. I guess I found it slow, but it also was integral to the story because it kind of establishes from the get go, like one of the founding pillars of the story, which is the father son relationship. So between Kevin and Sam. So I mean, I didn't give it full points, but I also was like, well, I mean, it's kind of integral, so it wasn't like bad points either. It just was like, okay.
Yeah. No, and I'd say that in regards to showing us this guy who's cocky and, getting away with stuff, he has some reminiscence of his dad, but he also has his own deeply ingrained flaws, which are unique from his dad, which they give you right off the bat. And so I enjoyed it. There was a couple things that, especially at the start, I was unsure of that upon reflection and thinking about how they developed the film, I thought they did really well as the story progressed. And I think that the opener is one of those examples of that. And this is going to segue right into the main character. So I feel free to move on to Sam from here. But I think one of the things that really struck me about this film is that there is a sense in which the character of Sam is developed really uniquely. And well, actually, before I get to that, I want to say that one of the things I did appreciate about this film is some of the things that are very obvious, they get to pretty early. And I appreciate when they do this in a film because rather than drawing out something that is unnecessary, they clearly introduce it. And then once they do that, it leads to further questions that aren't necessarily as clear. And so the question of, for example, obviously his dad disappeared. We as the audience have seen the first one, or they assume you've seen the first one. So you know the father's probably in the grid right still. He's not dead. He's alive in there. What's going on, we don't know, but we know he's in there. So the idea that he's going to enter the grid himself, the main character Sam, to find his father is like a foregone conclusion for us as the audience. So they are clearly leading to that from the start, and there's no like question to that, right? The other thing too, which this was kind of spoiled for me, I don't think it's a big spoiler, but they also go through this very quickly, is that the main antagonist of this film, which we'll get to in a minute, but just to preview that as an example, Clue looks like his father, but is not his father, right? And so someone passively said that to me before I watched the film, and I was like, oh, shoot, big spoilers. Turns out that's not a big spoiler because it gets revealed pretty early on. And I think that leads to greater questions of why does Clue exist? What is his purpose? What is the meaning behind what he's trying to do as the villain? I think are broader implications for the whole grid as a universe and for the plotline as a whole. So they take some of these things that are pretty clearly obvious and introduce those early on and dispel any shadows around those rather than trying to draw those out excessively. So I appreciated that in regards to the opener. In regards to the primary character, one of the things that really struck me is that he has this almost like he's so attached to his father and like the ideal he built up as a kid to a degree that he's not willing to like move forward in his life. And that was one of the things that really struck me about his character, is that he's basically caught in a past life that he had when he was like 7 and can't get over that, right? He's pretty much stuck there, and he's basically not let his life progress as a result of that. He's pulling pranks. He's living in a shed. He's not, he doesn't have a relationship. He doesn't really have a job because he doesn't need one. He's a rich kid, and so he's basically doing what he wants to do and doesn't really care about the life as it exists. So much so that he's struck with his reality where he like might meet his dad, and at first, kind of getting into the weeds here, but to demonstrate, I think, how well I think they developed this in a unique aspect is his father's confidant and friend, Alan, right? From the beginning of the first film, right? The character who existed previously that is now introduced in this one as still part of his company's board tells him that there's this pager that went off that indicated that his father might still be alive, but it came from his dad's old shop, the arcade. And he tells Flynn, hey, you should go and check this out. And Flynn's like, oh, I don't know if I should. It's like, hey, you like, what am I going to see there? This seems like a waste of time. And he's going to go see it, but it's also like that hesitancy. It's like, why would you do that if this is everything you've been pining for, right? But at the same time, there's a sense in which he's built his life around this idea that he's not moving forward in life. And so the idea is almost like he's lived so much in this false life that if he were to pursue this, which is what he kind of really wants, he's also going to like disrupt his life fully and how it exists now and completely change it if he pursues this path. Is it what he wants? Yes, it's what he wants, but it's also like it has broader implications for how he lives his life, what he's going to do stepping forward if he actually pursues this goal. And so it makes sense from like a subconscious standpoint that he would have some hesitancy to pursue that.
No, I mean, I think Sam Flynn is a great character in the sense that he is both like paralyzed in his current living condition, I guess, or the current state of mind he's living in is paralyzing him, both physically, emotionally. He's like stunted his growth as a person, and he's forever living as a child, but he's also refusing, and this is an outflowing of that because he's stuck in this mindset where he's just constantly living as a 7-year-old. He refuses to take on the mantle of his father. And it's not just the reluctant hero because, oh, I don't like responsibilities. The reluctant hero because of the fact that he can't accept a world in which his dad is gone. And so I really like the fact that they didn't just go with the, oh, I don't want to do that, I'm just reluctant hero, and actually gave an added layer of depth to his character that is fully explored in this film, in the sense that like he actually gets to go back and see his dad, and his dad doesn't end up being the person that he envisioned his dad to be. He envisioned his dad to be this hero who would stop at nothing to do the right thing. And it's like, oh, my dad's been living in hiding this whole time. This is not the person that I pictured. And so he goes against that. And then as the film progresses, he learns to appreciate the man that his dad has become and learn from him as the film progresses, even if they're not necessarily going at things the same way, I guess. And we'll get into that a lot more when we get to Kevin Flynn, but
yeah, for sure. What are your thoughts on Sam?
I'd agree that he's living in the past and not wanting to, not accepting responsibility and just kind of taking the single life and like living childishly in some ways. He denies that he's that he can't. He kind of outwardly accepts that his dad is gone, but inwardly, it's like it's clearly an inward thing for him, where it's like he doesn't want to believe that his dad is gone. So, I mean, that's all I can really say. His character is very well created. So,
I'll also say I appreciate the fact that they didn't go, oh, random character who doesn't want to take responsibility but is super awesome. Let's just have him sleep with a woman at the beginning of the film, and that's how we'll convey that message. Like we actually gave him something more interesting than that. Even though like you could easily, I mean, you must see it, like, right? It should be so easy to just insert random morning scene where there's a woman in his bed and boom, they would fit his character, but they did not go that route. So,
yep. I mean, you've seen that in other films, probably with the classic cocky hero. Insert Guardians of the Galaxy or whatever other film you want to. It happens all the time in the movie industry. But they didn't go that way with this one. Instead, all he has is a shed and a dog and a bicycle. So there you go.
Which honestly, his house, I'm not gonna lie, that looks so peak.
Of course,
I would love to live there. That looks so fire. He's like right on the water. He's got a freaking storage container that's like put together in multiple pieces. Anyways.
Nice. I mean, yeah, we're introduced to his character. He gets sucked into the grid and he gets introduced to this world. I think that the conflicts that he has, he initially gets thrown into all of the same types of fights, if you will, that his father did when he first got introduced to the grid. I'm going to forego for a minute the discussion on the antagonists here because I want to get to, I think, the father first, because the implications of what ties Flynn to this story is directly tied to his father. So what are your guys' thoughts on the reintroduction of Flynn to the story? The old man who's
Kevin,
on the outskirts of town, hiding away from... Oh, yeah, Kevin Flynn. Yeah, because I guess they both have the same last name.
Yeah.
Kevin Flynn's character and why he's hiding away and all of that. What are your guys' thoughts on the father figure in this film? Alvin, if you want to go ahead, feel free.
Definitely better developed from the first movie. He's well, like once you know the backstory, it makes sense why he's doing what he's doing. Because it's like you get the idea that he's like he had this grand dream, this grand vision, and this he was going to change the world, and he had this great work that he was doing, and then it all gets overturned in an instant, and he then like fights only to lose and goes into hiding because he's now stuck in the grid, and it's like he's been thoroughly beaten, and he's not safe in other parts of the grid, so he's out in the wild in this hidden lair, if you will. So his character like makes absolute sense. In some ways, makes a lot of sense. His actions flow through from who he is and what he values and desires. I, I don't really know what else to say. I mean, just. I mean, also, I guess I think I should say is a lot of the movie's philosophical takes clearly come from Kevin Flynn. Like, clearly he is the, and I would say, I mean, as far as getting into themes and ideas, this movie does play with a lot of ideas that are a mix of like Zen, Buddhism, some Christianity, and some other stuff. But like you've got these like religious ideas intertwined throughout. Mostly, I'd say Zen and Buddhism, but yeah, you see that throughout the movie.
Yeah, and I think that one of the things that's interesting about this film compared to the previous one is you see these ideas of like the power of the grid, if you will, in this whole new world, and taking this idea of like if this whole other world exists, what are the implications of this other world existing, right? Coming into contact with a completely new universe. And one of the implications they delve into in this is this idea of, I guess, not organic, but like grid life, if you will, or electronic life, right? And this is the idea that there's these particles or whatever that have organically existed within the grid that have come to exist that now Kevin Flynn's character is trying to understand, develop, and then integrate into reality, right? And trying to connect the virtual world to the real world. And this is like his magnum opus, if you will. This is like the thing he's trying to build toward. This is far beyond anything that he's done before. And he sees broader implications for the universe because of this. What are your thoughts on just this idea that is driving Kevin Flynn's character?
Ambitious. I mean, the closest thing comes to mind. I mean, you see this a lot with like, I mean, you kind of get the idea of almost like the Steve Jobs or like, I guess Tony Stark kind of as character, where it's like they have these grand ideas, grand visions, and they're working towards those ideas and this vision, even though they are like a cool character by the outside world. But in the case of Kevin Flynn, it blinds him just enough for him to like realize he doesn't see the mistakes he makes at certain points, or it doesn't correct the mistakes he makes in time, more or less, so that it causes him to go into hiding. But so I mean,
so when I was watching this, I think this is one of those few times where I've watched a film and it's like we've seen the idea of unique or life coming into existence in other films. Clearest example of this is the Jurassic series, right? Where you have Jurassic Park, the idea of dinosaurs that don't really exist in the world now, and then they get reintegrated into the world, and seeing the implications of that, right? This is in some ways dealing with that same type of concept, but in the digital sphere, which I don't know that I've seen in other films. Maybe you could make the argument for The Matrix, right? But like even that is a little bit different in its own way. I thought it was interesting. I thought it was a unique, intriguing idea. I was curious what your thoughts were on that.
Oh, okay. I thought I misunderstood. I thought you were relating it back to Kevin Flynn. Okay. Okay. No, that is a unique thing. I can't say I've seen a movie that's done that before, or I can't think of very many stories that have played with that idea of life coming to be in a digital form. I mean, obviously, the closest thing that we get with that is like AI or something that forms like that becomes intelligent. Usually, it's a negative kind of thing in most stories, unless you get something like Ender's Game or something. Uh, but in this particular case, so I mean, I guess it kind of see as like digital evolution or whatever, like the idea of life coming from like nothing almost, and or like forming out of the elements that are there, the digital elements. Uh, I'd say it's a unique idea. It's interesting. Uh, I don't know what else I'm trying to get. Well, like,
That's fair. And not asking for anything in specifics. I'm just opening up the floor. Andrew, what are your thoughts on the ideas and the concepts that Kevin Flynn's character is trying to deal with here? And in some ways, too, you're seeing the aspect of he's trying to protect two worlds here, right? He's protecting true humanity, right, in the real world by not trying to keep the portal open and try to get back home because he's at risk with Clue, but he's also trying to protect these organic or inorganic electronic beings that have come to exist in the grid. What are your thoughts on all of that?
Okay, are you asking about the thoughts? Because are we done talking about Kevin Flynn as a character too?
Well, I think those are intricately connected to
Sure.
his
Okay.
motivations, who he is as a character, what makes him interesting, all of that stuff. It's like a push and pull for him as a character. And so I mean, you look at this, right? He has these two different worlds he's trying to protect. And in some ways he says, I'm basically sacrificing my life and my lifestyle and everything that I had on Earth to try to keep both of these universes in existence, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So I mean, you guys have covered a lot of it. I think his character is meant to clash with both. He almost acts as a foil against the protagonist and the antagonist at times. He's also a very different character than the man we know in the original Tron movie, right? He starts out, we see him for a bit at the very beginning, but when we really get to meet his character and we truly get to flesh out where his character is at in life, he is a broken man. He has, like, everything, his life's work is brought to nothingness in his mind. He programmed Clue to create the perfect system, realized I was misguided then, and he is a version of me that is stuck at that time period, which is really interesting too when you think about the fact that Sam is also living stuck at a certain time frame. And the difference between Clue and Sam is that Sam can move past that, but he is incapable of doing so. He has one set program, and it is impossible for him to divert from that. That said, though, his program, that is literally him, is destroying things. And so it's not just him looking at his creation and realizing it's bad. It's him looking at himself and like self-reflecting and going, wow, what I wanted was terrible. You have the ISOs that he when he meets the ISOs, it changes everything for him, right? He says this: Clue takes away all of them except for one. And Quorra is essentially like not like physically, but she is essentially this lifeline for him. It is the reason he fights on, because he has to protect this last surviving, like, naturally occurring program within the grid. And when he meets Sam, he doesn't necessarily have no hope that things will get better, but he has conceded that he cannot beat Clue. And so his solution is just stand around and do nothing. And it's kind of like this idea that you get even in history. There are those who would rather stand by and do nothing and survive, and then those who would rather fight for their freedom and risk death. And it's the idea of living on your knees or dying on your feet, right? that there are these two opposing ideas, and Sam and his dad represent the opposite ends of that. And it is only once his son's life is at risk that he decides to go and do something, because at that point, now there is something of immediate importance over there. And you realize too, Kevin Flynn has a lot of power on the grid, even though he's been living in hiding. Like in the nightclub, when he shows up, the tables immediately turn in their favor. Sure, they leave, but the implication is he's leaving because he doesn't want to interact with Clue. Clue is the one thing on the grid that he cannot beat. And like he says earlier on, with every attack that I made, every time I resisted, he only grew stronger. He's essentially learning from everything that Flynn does. So I thought Flynn was a great character. He ends up making the ultimate sacrifice at the end of the film, right? Absorbing everything back into himself. And you can tell he doesn't want to. He's been avoiding this for decades. And the only reason he finally does is because he sees his son and the last surviving ISO finally have a chance to escape. And he knows it's the only way to make sure that they live. So, and to protect the world outside.
Well, it's interesting too. One of the things that I thought was intriguing about his character was when he has that monologue with his son about in his man cave or whatever it is that you want to call that, where he has all these relics of his old life while still living in the grid that he has created, and this idea that he's trying to combine these two worlds in a small way in his home place that it is, and it's like a tension there even in his own home. And his son's basically like, Dad, like, let's just go home, like we have this opportunity to go home, the portal's open, let's go home. And then his father says something along the lines of like, it conveys this idea that I am actively stopping my enemy by doing nothing, which is interesting, because a lot of people, when they're presented with this idea that like I'm going to just bystand and do nothing, the idea there is that I don't feel like it's worth getting involved in this conflict, or it's like it's going to ruin my life or whatever, versus he sees himself as doing an active good by doing nothing, which is interesting. Like, it's not really an idea I see presented a lot as a motive for characters in films in how they interact in their lives. And for him, it's like the best thing I can do is actively do nothing, because it's sabotaging the antagonist from achieving his goals. And so it was intriguing. It's definitely like counterproductive to what Sam wants to do. He's like, I don't want to be stuck here forever like you. That's not what I want from my life. I'm going to do everything I can to get out of here. So he's not going to agree with that, but it definitely is there's motive and reason for why he's doing things the way he is, and it's very understandable why he takes that stance. And so I appreciated it. I thought it was interesting. And of course, he's like this all-powerful being in some ways here, right? He's more or less a god on the grid. And so he can do a lot of things that other people can't do, but he also understands the risk of getting involved in the conflict, as he's demonstrated and discussed throughout the film. So I thought there was a lot of really unique tension for him as a character, especially to the degree that I think as soon as he enters the film, I think he overshadows his son as a character, and his son kind of gets like punted to the side as like the interesting thing that's going on, because frankly Kevin Flynn is freaking interesting compared to him. So I think that in some ways he definitely takes the limelight as the film progresses. Also, you get some Big Lebowski little hints in him after he starts talking about Zen and whatnot. So classic character for what's the actor's name?
Jeff Bridges.
Yeah, Jeff Bridges. Like, just classic Jeff Bridges, really leaning into what he does great. So loved it. I don't know if you guys have more to say on him. Otherwise, I think we should pivot into the antagonist of this film. He clearly has a lot to say in this, because he is the manifestation of the character we were just discussing, but in AI/grid form. Clue. What are you guys' thoughts on Clue as a character, as the antagonist? Is he compelling as a villain in this film? Avalon, what are your thoughts?
Clue is a very compelling villain. I love how he mirrors Kevin Flynn, how he is the inverse of him. But also at the same time, he's not just the inverse. He is his own character, where he's driven by his programming, if you will, to create the perfect system, and he feels But he's also angry at Kevin Flynn for betraying him, he feels, for betraying the dream they had together. And so it's like there is motive and there is legitimate anger. And there's even a sense in Clue where he's like, in the way he talks and the way he moves, he believes he's doing the right thing. He's got this goal and idea in mind, like this truly, he thinks it's altruistic and good for the programs, making a better world. So, I mean, all in all, he's a fully fledged character that's very well developed, but he's also clearly the villain because he's willing to do whatever it takes to achieve his goals and is quite willing to kill and destroy whoever it takes to get what he wants. So
yeah, 100%. Andrew, what are your thoughts?
He is just Ultron, bruh. Hear me out. If you listen to that episode, you know I like Ultron, so it's no surprise, or it should be no surprise, that I like Clue. I think Clue is freaking awesome, okay? First of all, even though the revelation that he is, like, the revelation of who he is happens fairly early on in the film, it still should have been a scene that was like, oh, shoot, that's crazy, bruh. Because Clue wasn't in the first film. He did not exist.
Actually, he did, technically.
Yes, he did.
He existed.
I mean, I didn't say this in the last podcast, but because it would have been referencing this one. But I was like, I didn't expect to see Clue in the first movie, and I watched like, oh, Clue's in this one.
Yeah, Clue's in that one. Anyways, even that said, nobody would have known like to think about Clue as a character other than the fact that like his dad references, oh yeah, I made Clue this character. Not to mention people probably weren't thinking, oh, he's going to look exactly like his dad. I remember watching this film with my dad for the first time, and even he was like, oh, what the heck? Like, that was a shocker for him. Not to mention the confusion. There's like two levels of confusion there. The first one is, why does he look the same age? And then you kind of buy the idea, okay, maybe time doesn't pass. And then the second switch is, oh, this actually isn't Kevin Flynn. Okay. So that scene right there is already really good. Like, I don't know if Maverick liked the dialogue in that scene. I like the dialogue in that scene. Just the interaction between Clue and Sam. And if you listen to the conversation, Clue never actually says that. He never affirms the idea that he's his dad. He just skirts the statement completely. And then
there's actually several things he skirts, including the pager as well. But
yeah,
go ahead, keep going.
And so it's just so good because if you're paying attention, you're like, oh, wait a minute. He's actually not saying really anything to Sam. He's just kind of fishing for information there. And then the second he says, that's a hell of a way to treat your son, he's like, oh, yeah, about that. I'm not your father, Sam. And it's like, as soon as he says that, Sam's like, oh, it's Clue. So that interaction, the fact that Clue's whole gambit in this film was just to get a new, in Kevin's own words, get a new piece on the board. And in Clue's own words, Sam was better than he ever hoped for. He was just hoping for someone. But the fact that it was Kevin's son is just like, oh, jackpot. There's no way he's not coming now. And then the whole light cycle grid, one, friggin' awesome. Probably the best sequence of the film in terms of the animation and like the way that they just brought the grid to life in a way that the movie in 1982 could not do. Is phenomenal. And even people who liked the original Tron movie, I would be willing to bet that like 99% of them would, or all of them would say this one was better than the light cycle battle in the first one. But the fact that the light cycle battle wasn't simply there for just, oh, we want to have something looking cool. This actually had meaning in terms of what were Clue's overarching goals here. And you get that when he is watching Quorra's like quad bike ride away and he just says, game on, old friend. Like, this is all going according to his plan up until this point. I mean,
well, even in the like before the light cycle like thing begins, his right hand person, was it Jarvis, whatever the guy's name? He's like, did I say the words perfectly?
Oh yeah.
Crowd seemed enlightened. He's like, the words weren't for them.
Yeah.
And it's like an indirect saying, like, he knows someone else was nearby, is, I guess, for Kevin Flynn, really, but, or whoever else was listening.
Yeah, I mean, he
like,
doesn't know. He's just assuming that
Mhm.
he needs to make a display, a public display of his son to
Mhm.
draw Kevin out. And so he doesn't know who's going to be listening, but he's assuming someone will be. So, yeah, no. Light cycles, great. I mean, you even have the way Clue interacts with Tron, which we'll get to Tron later, but like his treatment of Tron is also a reflection of his character, and that he is trying to purge the imperfections in his mind out of everything. And so that's why he repurposes Tron. Tron should not have free will in his mind. He should just be this mindless machine who obeys his commands. And that's what he does. And then as the film progresses, right, I think the best line in my mind from Clue is when they're on the bridge and he looks at Kevin Flynn and he says, "Am I not to create the perfect system?" And it's like, that is his entire character in one line. That is his goal, perfection. And so I don't want to get into the themes if we're going to keep talking about Clue, but I could just segue right into that from here.
I mean, it would be appropriate. I mean, all the characters are feeding into these ideas. We've already discussed them to some degree with Sam, anyways, and how and Sam include in regards to Kevin, where it's like they are dealing with moving on in their lives and what it means to like live in the past, if you will, or live in an old state versus like moving forward in life and what that means. Those are clearly themes that we've already discussed. So it would be appropriate to segue into Clue's ideals and how they translate to the broader implications of the film.
Sure. So this film, I think, at the forefront, in my mind, the prominent theme that is being addressed here is this idea of perfection. What is perfection? How is perfection attained? And at what is an appropriate cost for that perfection? In Clue's mind, there is no cost too great to attain perfection. In Clue's mind, perfection means order. It means organization, discipline. It means everything being in its right and appropriate place according to him. This is challenged in a way, I would say indirectly, because I think they don't necessarily challenge the idea of perfection. They just call it imperfection. But I think the idea the movie's going for is that perfection doesn't necessarily mean order. Perfection would mean freedom. And so Kevin Flynn presents the idea that it's unattainable at the end. He says perfection is unattainable. And that's something he said, you wouldn't know that because I didn't know that when I created you. Again, referencing back this idea that Clue is locked in this previous mindset that Kevin had. And because that's the mindset he had when he programmed him, Clue can't break free of it. But characters like Sam, like Kevin, Quorra definitely represents this idea of imperfection being beautiful. And Kevin says this to Sam as well when he says, if Clue got out, he'd destroy our world. The guy doesn't dig imperfection. And what is our world but if imperfect? And so it's they're playing with this idea that perfection, the perfection that Clue is going for of order, is not worth the price of freedom. And that is what all the heroes, in essence, are pushing for, is freedom. They want free will within the grid, free will within the real world. So they're fighting, in essence, for both worlds, but the entire movie is contained within the grid itself. So I think that Clue's character demonstrates this idea of striving for perfection in that it is order. And it's a great foil to the rest of the characters, because not only are they opposed on the fundamental levels here, he is literally trying to kill them. So
yeah, and it's also interesting too that it's like everything that you see in and maybe this isn't like explicitly stated, but it's an implication of the film, is like everything you see that has advanced since the first film is progress in the eyes of Clue, that he has taken everything and built upon it to the perfect state. Whether it's the light cycle games that you see going on, where it's not just the one level, but it's like triple leveled and everyone's interacting with each other, or the disc fights that you see going on, or the absolute purge of all the ISOs that is going on. All of this in Clue's mind is, this is better this way. It is perfect in this way. And if it's not perfect, it gets axed. It gets gone. It's destroyed. And that's one reason for the games too. It's like the perfect way to both entertain the masses while also expedite the process of getting rid of creatures that are not good for the world they exist in. And so it's like everything can be extrapolated to leading to the world that he's trying to create. And so anything that can't be integrated in that way is gotten rid of. And I think it's very interesting. It's also interesting too, some of the implications around the idea of art, the artificial, right, and things that are created by humankind that cannot also recreate in their own way, which is like a distinction between humanity versus the grid being, if you will, and that it's like Clue's primary ability and goal is to take everything and recreate it in his own image to be something that is perfect. But he cannot actually create something intrinsically in and of himself that is new. Everything that he has, he recreates from something that already existed. And so building new things is completely foreign to him, which is the like distinct thing that separates him from his creator, Kevin, is that he cannot actually create the grid. He simply builds off of what already existed on the grid and makes it better and more robust in his eyes. And so it's like it's an interesting concept of this idea that's like this, there is this wall that Clue keeps hitting that he can't simply break through, which is one of the reasons why it's like he's trying to get to the real world and fix that as part of his primary programming, but it's also that he can't like make a new portal for how to get out of there. That's not part of his being. His being is intrinsically tied to how he was created to begin with. So anyways, fascinating character. I'm if you know anything about me and like where my storytelling finesse is in my mind, I like the idea of the artificial intelligence and all of the ideas around that. So, I was definitely a fan of Clue's character from the start. No doubt about that. So yes, I was a big fan of Clue and all the things you guys discussed. I 100% agree
I do think, right, you kind of touch on this idea that's much bigger. The film doesn't explore it a ton, but you do get like that scene where they're on the train and they see all these programs that are being repurposed, and you get that line where he's like, Clue can't create new programs, he can only destroy or repurpose. So I don't know that they necessarily needed to go in all that deep into that, but you get all of that just from these little blips throughout the film. So
yeah, and the last thing I would like to touch on in regards to Clue, which is interesting, is that the character of Clue in many ways also mirrors the villain in the first film, right? The MCP, the Master Control Program, which is interesting purely from the standpoint that this was the creature or the creation that Flynn was trying to destroy in the first one. And Kevin does destroy the first one, but in the process, he destroys it. He builds on this new world only to then create the very thing he destroyed in the first one and recreate the problem in a worse form that he now has to deal with, and he cannot cannot overcome. He cannot destroy his own creation and stop the thing that he stopped in the first one. So it's interesting that like they don't necessarily deal with it in broad perspectives either here. There's a lot of things they touch on in this film that are very interesting, that have broader implications. So at the end of the day, they kind of just put out there and end up having to let lie for the sake of continuing the broader dialogue on perfection, right? Yeah. But the idea that it's like you have created the very thing that you destroyed in the first one, and we're not able to overcome it in this situation is a fascinating idea.
Yeah. Well, I mean, because he just made a better version of himself, if you will, right? Because Clue's whole thing is being the perfect being. So, right, he's stronger, faster, probably smarter than Kevin in what intellect he was given, right? He's more charismatic in his abilities to speak. And I think one of the coolest scenes too, with Clue is when he's giving that speech, and it is a direct mirror to Kevin's speech at the beginning of the film when he's talking about the grid. And Kevin's talking about the grid, Clue's talking about the real world, and he just ends his speech with, "It is our destiny." And it's just like, oh, that's kind of crazy there.
Yeah, really interesting. So, what are your guys' thoughts as the story progresses? Obviously, it goes from there to the situation where he ends up going to Zeus, who is this other being that was supposedly fighting for the people, but turns out he switched sides and is now working with Clue to try to achieve his own ends. And they lose the master disc, if you will, that belongs to Kevin Flynn, and it gets taken to Clue. And they end up going on this escapade to both get back the to the portal, and they get back the disc and have this whole showdown between them and Tron, who reveals is still alive. He has just simply been manipulated, etc., etc. What are you guys' thoughts on the progression of this film? Did you think that the progression, the enhanced tension they have in the middle of this, do you think it was compelling? Do you think it wasn't? Andrew, what are your thoughts?
I think it was good, right? This film does not really slow down. There's not really any points in the film where I'd go, oh, that was unnecessary there. You go from light cycle grid, meets his dad, runs away from dad, gets you into a massive fight, and then they have to make their way to the portal. They can't afford to waste time anyways. I will say, this isn't necessarily a mark against the movie. I do kind of wish we got more time with Zeus's character, because I thought he was interesting. He's basically just Loki, but on the grid, to be honest. Like his whole thing is you get this idea that like he's got a false identity, because who he is in public is just this owner of a bar, when in reality he's kind of just this mob boss who's got this persona he puts on. And you do kind of get he ultimately ends up just kind of being a character for the sake of showing Clue's ruthlessness, which I don't know that we necessarily needed to see how ruthless he was, considering he's, as far as we know, he doesn't have a problem killing programs. But I did like his inclusion. I did like the inclusion of the bar setup. You get to see that the resistance fighters are still around, if not very much outnumbered. And you get to see that like Clue's task force is feared by everyone. Like everyone in the bar, the second they show up, is running and screaming, because Clue's task force will destroy you on the spot. Like they have the tools to do it, and they will just de-res you is the word they use. So I thought that was done well. I think the fact that it shows like Quorra's character getting her arm chopped off, like even though she survives by the end, it serves to show Sam that his actions do have consequences, and he was kind of being an idiot and going like, sure, he was well intentioned in that something does need to happen, and his dad finally accepts that, but he also went at it alone and acted almost irrationally. Like he was so used to in the real world just doing whatever came to his mind, just charging at problems head on, and he realizes that can't be the solution to everything, because it can result in people getting hurt. It would have resulted in him dying if Quorra didn't save him, and it resulted in Quorra dying if his dad didn't save them both. So, and at the end of the day, that whole scene, even though they survived, resulted in the disc getting lost. So they were still actively losing something as a result of his actions. So,
for sure. And I will say, as a side for Zeus, as much as I do think it's interesting, simply, I agree. I don't think it adds like a ton more so than to develop both Sam and Quorra's character. But in regards to like the biggest thing it did for me was build the world, and the idea of it was inherently intriguing that you have bars in the grid. Like that's interesting. The idea that a freaking program would be like, I want to take a break and get a drink. It's just kind of a funny idea, but kind of an interesting idea as well. Like what is going on here? Why would a program want to take a break and get a drink at the bar? That doesn't make a ton of sense, but maybe it does make sense in the program world. It was intriguing, and then you have the DJs and all that other stuff. So at the very least, it was very fun. A great addition to the world that they created. Avalon, what are your thoughts on the enhanced tension in this film? Do you think they enhanced tension?
I think for the most part, yes. And I actually did like how with every small victory, there was always an added cost or like usually a setback in some way. Um, and the actions did flow out of the characters. It wasn't like, oh, this needs to happen because of the sake of the story. No, like Sam legitimately, because of how he's been doing things on his own, as Andrew just said, it made sense for him to go on his own to try to find his way to the portal. Uh, and Quorra probably had the best intentions with Zeus, but she couldn't have known that Zeus had changed sides. No one could have predicted that. So, I mean, there's just like these things and these like betrayals and everything, they make sense within the context of the story and the world it inhabits. So as the story progresses, like things do get gradually worse, and it forces action on the parts of Kevin and Sam to head and Quorra and head to the portal first, which gets him on the ship. The only point in the story which I feel like it kind of stops a little bit is after they retrieve Kevin's disc and Quorra from the main ship from Clue's ship, and then they're being pursued. Because then they're being pursued, and at that point there is conflict, but up until the portal, it's kind of like, I mean, they're kind of winning at that point. They're not really losing. Now when they get the portal, things change a little bit. So that being said, it's not like bad. It's just at that point, tension kind of slacks off a bit because it's like, oh, looks like they're going to make it at that point. There's little reason to doubt them.
Sure, so. And it's a little oasis, if you will, in the middle of the film where they reset everything. All the good guys have all the chips back on their table, and they're kind of back in the game still, if you will. And so, in some ways, they're in the upswing, right? Everything is going in the direction finally, and so it kind of does undo a lot of the, maybe the tension they had in the previous part of the film, because no one's dying at this point, everyone has the discs they need, etc., and they're on their path to get out of there. So I kind of get what you're saying, but at the same time, then immediately after that, they ratchet up the tension immediately. They have Tron coming at them in his flying thing, which also, I just loved the fact that they took the, what do you call the cars, whatever it is in Tron.
The light cycles?
They take this original device, right? Yeah, the light cycles, and they take them and they extend that into a flying version of it. And I was like, oh, such a great logical extension of the world to enhance it in a new way. Love that. And they just move it from there into the development as it's also a dogfight at that point, as they're trying to stop the heroes from getting to the portal. And you have the whole conflict with Tron as he realizes his original intention, right? His original programming to fight for the users, right? And he comes into the world and he no longer works for Clue, right? And comes into conflict with Clue at the very end. What were your guys' thoughts on that? Did you think that and we haven't really talked about Clue at this point in the podcast.
No, Tron, you mean?
Did you think that Clue and his integration was compelling?
Tron, you mean Tron, right?
You meant Tron, right?
Sorry, Tron. Yeah, Tron.
Not Clue. We've been talking about Clue so much.
We've talked about Clue a lot. Yeah. What are your thoughts on Tron? Because we haven't really talked about him, and he turns against Clue.
I mean, for the most part, Tron's, like, what we've seen of Tron at first is in the backstory that Kevin tells Sam. And we're given just enough to believe that he could have died or could be gone. We don't know. But it's also left nebulous enough, so we don't know exactly what happened to Tron. But then we're shown that we have this character named Rizzler, who's been, like, the right-hand henchman of Clue this whole time. And then you have the ship where we're shown programs going in, coming out as soldiers, essentially. At which point you start to realize Rizzler is Tron, essentially. And I'd say, for the most part, he's a great example of a loyal henchman to Clue. I mean, he does his job well. He's effective, and he's not someone to be messed with, generally. I am not completely sure I'm convinced about the character change of when it happens, just because it seems a tad sudden in the middle of the story. And I feel like there wasn't enough, like, hints beforehand that this was going to happen at this point. Now, that doesn't mean it's bad. It's just personally, I'm not sure. I couldn't give it full points on that particular because of that particular scene. If that makes sense. I was like, I'm not sure if I completely like this. So
Sure. In regards to this is a little bit to like, did they have compelling revelations in this film? And one of them is like Tron exists. Tron turns sides. The existence of the ISOs, the existence of his father versus Clue, and all these other things are like so a bunch of small little revelations. Tron is definitely one of those, right?
Yeah.
And so,
well, no, the revelation of Tron being Rizzler being Tron, I actually had no problem with the revelation. Siri wants to join in on this.
Yeah, exactly. Shut
up. No, the revelation of Rizzler being Tron, I actually thought that was good. I mean, it's kind of like the whole Darth Vader revelation kind of thing. It's like, oh, this actually works for the story. The revelation itself wasn't a problem for me. It's his character change in the middle of the dogfight where he's like, I fight for the users all of a sudden. It just, that particular moment in the movie like took me out of it just a little bit. Like, this seems a little sudden of a character change.
Well, so. And I think maybe the reason you're getting to that conclusion is that it's not clear what happens in that scene, which maybe Andrew can push back on this effectively, but why in that moment it was compelling for him to make that change, right, compared to previously in the film. And you can maybe make the argument that Kevin does something in that moment that makes him do that. But yeah, I mean, in my standpoint, from the moment that you see the flashback where Tron picks up the 2 discs, my mind was instantly like, oh, it was clearly Tron. I wasn't surprised by it, but I still appreciated it and thought it was fully developed. So
I would have seen that scene with the 2 discs as foreshadowing, but yeah.
Yeah, no, it was definitely foreshadowing, but it was definitely on the heavier foreshadowing side, in my opinion. But we're gonna leave that as it is. It's not a big deal. I'm not trying to make an issue of that. What are your thoughts on Tron, Andrew?
I freaking love Tron.
Okay. I also have to say, as a side, right? The whole series is named after this character, which is kind of interesting, just because he's like, I mean, there's 2 things about him. One, he's a side character in both of these films. He probably will be in the next one. I mean, let's be honest here. But also, it's like the one thing that you always know about Tron is he fights for the users. That is his programming. That is what he's built for. And so the idea of this whole thing is that this series is built on fighting for the users, fighting for the people is like the basis of his existence. And it's intriguing, and it's appropriate in some ways that the series is named after him, even though he's not really like a big character in this film at all. But anyways, go ahead, Mr. Tron lover, sir.
Okay. Couple of things here. Well, number one, the reason in my mind that these films being named after Tron is so good is because Tron represents the ideal program. He is the perfection that Flynn is chasing after. He is the program that is able to think for himself, but also achieve the goals that were programmed into him. And the goals for him, different than Clue's, were to protect users at all costs. Why is this so important? Because his shift at the end is perfect in my mind. There's foreshadowing. I will make the case that there's foreshadowing throughout this film for his shift. Every time he interacts with the users, Sam or Kevin, he hesitates. When he's in the disc battle with Sam, he stops because he sees the blood and he says, user. Remember, as far as we know, Tron wasn't expecting to find a user here, but he hesitates to make the killing blow because his primary programming is to protect users. So long as he isn't trying to kill users, it's plausible that Clue's able to reprogram him and repurpose him to do whatever he wants. But every time he comes into contact with a user, he hesitates throughout the film. Why does he turn? Because Clue gives him the command to finish the game, to kill Sam and Kevin. That's when he hesitates. That's when he's staring at this plane and he's like having this internal struggle, like, I can't do this. I can't. And he says, I fight for the users. And that's when the break happens. And with the programs, right, this whole film is about decisions, the idea of free will versus control. For in life, when you make major decisions, right, it something can change in a snap. For Tron, it's the simplest thing. It is that he is incapable of killing users because it goes against his primary programming. And so when he's given that command, it literally short circuits Clue's reprogramming. It undoes it because it goes against the primary function that Tron was created for. And so while I get the idea that like it seems a little sudden to someone who doesn't understand the idea that Tron was created for one primary purpose, when you understand that his primary function is protecting users, it makes his transition throughout the film so much better, and it makes his actions throughout the film better too, because there are moments where like he pauses, he's watching. If you watch in the background, whenever Sam or Kevin is in a room and Tron is there, he's kind of intrigued by them. When he's fighting Sam, he hesitates. When he's given the order, he snaps. Because up until that point, he had never been given the order to kill a user. That order had never been issued in the film. So I think Tron's character is awesome. I think he also is a great foil to the themes of the film, which is that this idea of perfection, right? You can try to control people, right? But there will always be a fight for freedom inherently. And so Tron's character, his programming is fighting to break free. And so in that moment, his programming finally broke free because he was commanded to do the opposite of what he was created to do. So I don't know if that necessarily changes your mind, but I remember watching this years ago and not even really thinking about it. But then as I was watching this film, especially because I watched it directly after watching the original Tron, and Tron's programming there is made abundantly clear. And I think it's made pretty clear in here, right? Of course, he's a side character, and they're not really trying to reveal until later that this is Tron, but they put all the necessary pieces of information there where it's like when Kevin is talking about Tron and Clue and what they were made for, he's like, Tron was from the old grid. He was created for the users, and I brought him over into this grid to do the same thing. And then he talks about what Clue was created for. So you have all the right pieces there. It's just very subtle. And I am someone who loves subtlety and foreshadowing. And there was definitely a lot of that with Tron's character in my mind.
I'm surprised you didn't bring up Attack on Titan, but we'll leave that as it is. I think that's a pretty compelling case overall. I don't know. I think it's interesting that they deal with that primarily with Clue and Tron. And I think they could have even extended it just slightly with a line or two with the other programs, but I don't think it needed that. I just think it would have been added an extra finesse touch to characters such as Zeus, for example. But I'm going to leave that as it is. We get to the final scene where you have Clue about to destroy Sam and Quorra, and instead he sees the opportunity to take the disc from Kevin Flynn, and he does so because he says, I win if I do this, and it's worth it. He goes to take it and realizes it's not Kevin's disc, it's Quorra's. And in that moment, Sam and Quorra fly off back into the real world while Kevin self-destructs more or less and destroys the entire world he created. What are you guys' thoughts on the final climactic scene of the film, the conclusion? Do you think it's compelling? Do you not? What are your thoughts, Avalon?
As you said, at that one point, because there was a lull, and then it comes back with the confrontation on the bridge. And that climax is perfect because, in one way, it forces there to be a cost to them achieving the portal because they can't get by Clue because he's blocking the way through. So they trick him, and he unintentionally lets Quorra through with Kevin's disc. So, and the only way but also forces Kevin, in order to stop Clue, he has to reintegrate Clue back into himself, which, as Quorra said earlier in the movie, should kill both of them. So it creates, in the one way, it creates a cost to the ending where Sam gets back to the real world with Quorra, and it also forces Sam to grow up in a way, because it's like the very thing he was refusing to believe for so long has now actually happened. His dad is actually gone, and so he actually now does move on with his life when he gets back. And there's an indication at the end of the film that he's now taking responsibility and moving forward. And so, and while it doesn't go into detail with it, but you get that short conversation with Alan in the arcade, you get the idea that things are changing now with him. He's looking at things differently. So you see a character change in Sam now that is of the story has wrought in him. Quorra is now part of the real world, and she gets to experience all the things she's longed to see and has indicated she wants to see earlier in the movie. Um, so it's a very satisfying ending. I really am happy, and I think that sunrise is very, in some ways, it was a very cinematic shot. It's a very good shot, good way to end the movie after all the dark, like in all the darkness of the grid, like it's all like these flashy lights and darkness. So that sunrise is a very beautiful way to end this movie.
Well,
So
also just on that note alone, this film, the real world, the entire beginning of the film is dark outside. So the
mhm.
contrast at the end of having the sunrise is just so good, because it's like when you come out of a dark room and there's like blinding light. It is just a such a shift in setting. So it's very symbolic, and I was greatly appreciative of that too. So
Yeah, and you're
um
seeing like as a conclusion to, I mean, four of the characters in this film, you have them all completed in their own ways. It's like, one, you see that for Kevin Flynn's character, he realizes he can't stay on the sidelines, that like in order to truly play the role he needs to play and like be responsible as the leader that he has been to create this world and create all the things that are in this world, including creating the threat in this world, he needs to take responsibility and address it and face it head on, even if it means his own destruction, right? So Kevin's arc very clearly construed and conveyed in a satisfying way as it comes to a conclusion. In regards to Clue's arc, right, you see that he has to perfect everything. And the fact that it's like the idea that you have to live with imperfection is just something he can't live with. And so he literally can't live with it because he ends up getting integrated into Kevin and dies with him in the process of the entire world exploding. So both of their arcs are completed very well in a single moment in that time. At the same time, you see, I mean, Quorra's you just demonstrated, so I don't need to add to that. And then, of course, with Sam's, he also sees he faces the reality of what happened to his father and has to move on with his life, and he does by taking the reins with his father's company and also helping to reintegrate it toward a more prosperous path and a more responsible path as he starts to be take the reins on his own life, if you will, rather than standing on the sidelines waiting for something to happen to reintegrate him based off of the pain that he's experienced with the past with his father being gone. So I mean, in one like fell swoop, they just took all these characters, completed their arcs, and were like, "Here we go. This is the film. It's done, and everything is completed in a nice little bow." I appreciated all of that being done
yeah.
very well in the span of like 5 minutes. So, Andrew, I don't know if you have thoughts, though, but go ahead.
A couple of things, and one, I do want to mention we haven't really talked about Quorra's character, so I don't know if we wanted to. I'm going to address the ending, and we can kind of circle back on it.
Yeah, we can sideline it to Quorra after that.
Yeah. So with Clue's ending, I'm sure we've all here have seen the Les Miserables. Clue's character, his ending in my mind is very similar to Inspector Javert's, where it's like this idea that Javert can't live in a world in which injustice exists. Like he lives by the book. In a similar way, Clue is a character who just cannot accept a world in which there is imperfection. It's just like when I was watching it, like that was the character that came to mind for me was Ultron and Javert, and you like mash them together, and now you have Clue. So I really like Clue's ending. And the other thing too, right? They really harp on this idea of primary programming for all of the programs on the grid. Clue's primary objective is the perfect system. So when he's faced with the decision of chase down Sam and Quorra or take out Kevin Flynn, he could probably chase down Sam and Quorra and still take out Kevin Flynn. But because his primary objective is the perfect system, and a part of that is obtaining that disc as his primary purpose, it's like he is compelled to go after Kevin. And Kevin knows that. That's why he says, this is your mission. This is what you came here for. And he is playing off of the idea that that is his primary goal as a program. And so he knows that he'll have to come after him first and foremost. So I love that little tidbit in there. I really like Sam's ending. it's not just that he's grown as a character, right? It's that his father enabled him. He or not enabled. I don't know if that's the right way, but his actions allowed for Sam to live through what he needed to in order to move on, because Sam is stuck in the past. And why? He doesn't have closure on his dad. He doesn't know why his dad left. He doesn't know what happened to his dad. He doesn't know what his dad's doing. And so he gets all of these questions answered throughout the film. He knows that his dad loves him. He knows his dad didn't abandon him. He knows his dad was actively trying to do what he thought was right. And so it's not just that he has closure and that his dad's dead now. It's that he got the time with his dad that he needed in order to get closure and move on from that. And so now it's like he leaves the grid a completely different person. I was I don't know, it was like a year ago. I was watching a video. There was someone who's trying to like really pull at the Christian parallels here, and they're like, this whole movie is just Sam's baptism. He goes in and comes out a different person. I don't really buy that, but I do think the fact that he goes in and leaves a very different person is interesting, right? You get the same thing like with Chronicles of Narnia, with The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. Actually, most of the books, right? The first time a character goes into Narnia, it transforms them. It is a very transformative experience. And so Sam, in the span of like only, a few hours, his and the real world, comes out not only accepting of his father's death, but he is now a responsible individual. He's ready to take on the world, right? We're given the implication also Sam is a very capable individual. He's not only athletic and fit, he's intelligent. He went to, what was it, Caltech is I think the school he mentions at the beginning of the film when he meets his dad. So he is capable of running this company, yet he also knows how to hack things. So I really like the way that they concluded his arc. I talked about Clue, Flynn, Quorra, we talked about the ending of. We can get into her actual character now, unless you guys had more to talk about. I don't want to brush over that either. So,
no, I mean, it's honestly a perfect segue into Quorra's character. So go ahead.
I think Quorra's character is great, right? You have such a small ensemble in this film, and yet every character plays a different role. Even though some of them have similar roles, like say Clue and Tron, they both are serving the role of the program, or you have people serving the role of users. Quorra's is unique in that she is neither user nor program. She is like a mix of both, in that she doesn't have a primary function. She is a program that has no programming. She is this blank slate, which is what makes her so interesting. And you get this almost innocence from her, where she is this bright-eyed, bushy-tailed individual who just loves to explore new things, and the outside world fascinates her. She read this entire collection of books, and Sam's like, wow, light reading, huh? And so her trust in Zeus is totally plausible. She sees the best in everyone. And so she couldn't imagine a world in which Zeus does what's wrong. She sees the best in both Sam and his father, even though they're like diametrically opposed at the beginning of the film. And right, you get the revelation later in the movie that she is the last ISO, and that's why Kevin had her with him, right? His mission is not only to deprive Clue of his goals, it is to protect this last surviving miracle, in his own words. So I liked her character. I don't know that her character necessarily transforms by the end of the film. I think her character is more meant to represent the ideas the film is trying to promote of this programming, right? And she represents the one individual on the grid who doesn't have this primary programming and isn't defined by that primary objective.
Yeah, I mean, definitely in regards to her symbolism as a character, I think that I agree. She plays a very strong role symbolically in the film. Other than that, I mean, I think she was fine. I didn't hate her as a character. I thought she was more basic in regards to a, more or less black or white type character. It's like, oh, this is good or this is bad, and she's very idealistic about everything. We've seen characters like that exist in the past, and I thought that she played that out fine. I didn't think that there was necessarily anything super distinctive about her other than what she symbolized and her creation as a character. But
Sure. And
yeah,
I mean,
I see that she added to the film. I wouldn't disagree, and I think she was a good add.
yeah. And I think it's interesting, right? Because you have characters that are the idealistic, bright-eyed, excited. It was almost like they had to make her that way, and was because of the fact that she is, as a character, a blank slate. She's existed for
Sure.
what, I guess maybe 15 years or something in the grid. Or no, it wouldn't be 15. It would be like 20 years, because he was like 7 or 8 when his dad left. He's 27 when he gets there. So she by default is this blank slate of a character, and yet I still appreciated the fact that they were somehow able to give her some level of depth, in that she's still this character that it is inherently lacking in depth.
Sure. Albany, have any additional thoughts on Quorra?
She adds to the story and adds motive for both Sam and Kevin. I think she's I personally liked her character. I can see what you're saying about her being maybe like not being as memorable, but I kind of disagree a little bit. I did like her character, and I do. I think her naivete is like she's this fighter, but she's also but she's all excited about the real world outside of the grid, and she wants to see it someday. At the same time, she's I don't know if she's like naive about the faults in other people, because she's willing to admit some people are wrong or evil. I think it's more like she just. I mean, in the case of Zeus, she just didn't know that Zeus had changed sides. I wouldn't say that she like it didn't cross her mind. Obviously, she may have thought about it, but she just didn't know. Last she saw of him, he was on their side. So,
Yeah.
but it like so. I mean, I don't know. I would say I like her character, but I don't know what else to add. So, I mean,
No, and that's fine.
So-
I mean, I would say in regards to be clear, it's not like I disliked her character. I think in regards to a lot of the characters, it's pretty much like she's naive, she's an ISO, there you go. And so that's kind of what you take away from her. She still adds a lot. It's not like she's a bad ad, like I said, but especially in regards to Kevin, in regards to Clue, in regards to even Tron to some degree. But we also have a past precedent with him in regards to Sam. Like she is much less developed, I would say, than these other characters who have a lot more like depth and implications for the film. But it's also that they are integrally tied to like what it means to fight this fight, right? And what it means to make decisions, as Andrew's been talking about consistently in this film. And so she is related, but not necessarily as like desperately as these other characters are. So it's not like it's a big like critique, and to that like is a sum total of 0.1 of my rating. So
Yeah.
It's not like it makes a big impact on how I view this film.
I will also say briefly before we get towards the end here, there are a couple of things about this film that I really appreciated. One is the way that they're able to call back to the original film without taking away from this one. You get when Sam breaks into the vault and he literally looks at it and goes, "Oh wow, that's a big door." Literally a direct line from the first film. You get so many little, like even the light cycles themselves, I would argue, are a callback to the first film. You have the I don't remember what the little upside down U-shaped
The
ships are
Enforcers.
called. The Enforcers. You get one of those at the beginning, and it's like they're taking everything from the grid you saw before and showing you how it's newer and better and brighter and way cooler. I already mentioned the music. Really like that. I think the light cycle battle is probably the coolest part of the film cinematically. Even the disc wars are way better than the disc wars were in the first film, where it was just, I'm going to bounce it off of my disc, as opposed to actually tossing that thing around. The planes, completely new ad, but freaking awesome. So thematically, musically, cinematically, it's awesome. And so like normally in the podcast, right, we're talking about the plot of the film. Was the story good? I think this movie had a phenomenal story it was telling, and the ideas they're playing with, the characters they're developing, but also visually, aesthetically, like everything else about the film that I see as like added bonuses, it's all there. So I really liked all that. I also appreciated that they didn't turn Quorra's character just into this love interest for Sam. Like, you get some little inklings of that throughout the film, but they're not forcing it. It's not like that's all her character is. Her whole character is meant to represent the idea of ISOs and the opposing idea against like the programmed programs, if you will. Not to get too repetitive there with the word, but I appreciated that her character was her own character in her own right, rather than just let's make a female character who's just hot and there to look pretty for the main male protagonist. So, anyways,
Yeah. How can she even be the love interest? He doesn't even kiss her, bro. Like, what?
true. He looked at her.
Now, what are your guys' thoughts on the lasting impact of this film? Clearly, we are about to see the next one of this, Tron Ares, coming out, so it's definitely had some sort of impact. Do you think that it's a long-lasting impact, a compelling impact? What are your thoughts, Avalon?
It's interesting because this is definitely one of those low-line cult fandoms in a way that just keeps surviving. If you think about it, just like because Tron came out what 1980s, and this like it got this cult following that persisted to the point that Disney made Tron Legacy, and then I guess they just didn't. They thought about making a sequel to Tron Legacy for a while, but didn't make it till now. And but like there's still a fan base for this franchise, so I mean the fact of making a third one just shows that there's just a strong enough fan base to keep the series around. So even though this is only the third movie we've got in the last what 4 decades, 3 4 decades.
Yeah, for sure. Andrew, what are your thoughts?
I think that this film is different than the new one that's coming up. This film came out almost exactly 30 years after the first one. So I think it is meant to be a continuation, but the idea, right, the name Tron Legacy is both, in all reality, it is a legacy film, right? They're taking this movie that was somewhat successful, had a massive cult following, and went, let's make a film about it. I don't necessarily think that's what's happening right now. I think Disney is desperate and going, how can we make more money? Well, Tron Legacy was successful, so let's make another one. Secondarily, I don't know that this film will really work unless they like bring back the legacy characters. Like, I really want to see characters like Sam and Quorra. Thus far, we've only seen Kevin Flynn, which is a bad sign to me because I don't want him back. His arc was definitive, and I think it'd be interesting to see like a Quorra who has now become disillusioned with the world per se. Right? She starts off as this innocent person who wants to see the world and has this fantastical idea of what it is, but the real world is a very messed up place. And so she's going to have to experience that. And when we pick up in present day, it'll be very different than when she envisioned. It'd be interesting to see a Sam who has been running his father's company. And it's foreseeable that they could fast forward like after Sam and Quorra are dead. So maybe that works that way. Clearly, it was successful enough in what did it come out in like 2012, 2011? I don't remember the exact year.
Yeah.
Okay. Clearly it was successful enough for them to look at it and go, this could be good money for us. Will the movie be any good? I doubt it will be better than this one, considering I gave it an 8. But I mean, clearly it did well enough. On top of that, I've met plenty of people who have only seen Tron Legacy. They did not see the first one, and they loved Tron Legacy. And I think there's a lot to love about it. And I don't really think you need to see the first one at all to see this one and still enjoy it, because they cover everything that you need in this film. And I don't really see these films either as a continuous like grouping of movies, especially since when this one came out, it was like 30 years since the last one came out. It's not like the MCU or Lord of the Rings where we're expecting a second one. It was, we had the first one, people loved it. They gave us a second one, people loved that one too. So in terms of lasting impact, clearly it made Disney a lot of money. Clearly we're getting another one, and they thought it could make them even more money. So
yeah. We'll see what they do with the next one. I mean, that being said, there's a lot of things that they have going for this next one that are interesting from like a thematic or ideas perspective that they can really play with in this next one that could be really good, right? The whole idea of both Clue and even in some ways going back to the 1982 original Tron, the MCP, you have some ideas that will be discussed in this next one that we know based off of the trailers that are inherently intriguing, right? The idea of like the grid actually coming to the real world and the implications of that. What will that look like? What are the ramifications of that? Are huge. It's something they were fighting for all the time in this past film. And the fact that they actually get there is crazy, right? So it could be really good just in regards to that. In regards to Quorra, right? The disillusionment is definitely an opportunity. Like, does Sam actually fulfill his father's goal of like bringing the two worlds to a reality, or does he keep Quorra a secret? Like, is she not really known, even though she's completely different from the world that she now exists in, right? There's huge implications for that, et cetera, et cetera. There's a lot of ideas that they can play with here. Tron, I mean, frankly, Tron's probably coming back. There's almost no doubt about that. So, like, what are they going to do with him? He disappeared into the proverbial grid of water at the end of this film, but you know he's probably still alive. So what is going to go on with him? What is his role in this new world, and what happened to him from the end of this film? We don't really know.
In my mind, Tron, even before I knew this new movie was coming out, Tron would have survived, because when Kevin absorbs everything into himself, the idea is reintegration. We're given the idea that everything he creates, he reabsorbs. Tron was not something he created, and it's very explicit. He brought him over from a pre-existing program. So even absent us ever getting another film, my assumption was just Tron is somewhere in this like empty grid right now. So
right.
I think it's definitely plausible for them to bring him back.
I don't know. Based on the ending of the movie, we're not actually shown the complete destruction of the grid, is all I'll say. I don't know. We only shown like the immediate explosion of the area. And I guess you could imply that everything was destroyed, but we're not shown enough for that to be evidenced. So it could have just been also a local event. So I would just argue that to say the whole grid is destroyed because he reintegrated Clue with himself, I would disagree, because I don't think that's evidence in the movie. So, but
I think
you're drawing that based on things that are. You're basing that off of certain assumptions as well.
It's implied, but there's a way around that for sure.
Yeah. And I think whether or not you buy the implication that he absorbs everything he creates or not, the idea is that the grid has been evolving, right? You get the ISOs, which weren't his creation. And so it's kind of like you have this blank template, and it's just been left sitting. So that, whether or not he absorbs everything he created or not, there's still something in that. I mean, you even get the fact that Sam uploads something or other to this necklace he's wearing. So I'm pretty sure that necklace will be a core part of this next film, if they want to actually take advantage of everything that was left to them in this previous one.
Yeah, for sure.
I just want to see Tron, bro.
I mean, based off of... yeah. I mean, based off of everything we've seen from Disney recently, I don't expect anything less than a cash grab, but maybe we'll get something good out of them. We'll have to see. But for now, I think that's where we'll leave it. So that's the pod. We hope you all enjoyed. We'll be back as we always are next week. We'll see you all.
Are you changing your rating? I need to know.
No. I mean, as much as I think that this discussion was enjoyable, I don't think that anything particularly persuaded me.
Not even my talk about Tron convinced you?
No. Like, I still enjoyed Tron. I thought that
I would say my score goes up to a 7, but that's also because I realized certain things on my score perhaps were a little off. But also, I mean, there are some things I didn't consider that both of you brought up. I was like, oh, that's a fair point. Though actually it wasn't Tron, I'm still not sure I'm convinced about Tron, or what you said about his character
Fair enough.
change. I'm still thinking about that. I'm like, I don't know. So...
All right.
That's the pod.
Yep.
That's the pod. We'll see you all next week. Until next time.